We begin the day with a call for a new global order. China has laid out its vision for the world at a summit at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which has just wrapped up in Tianjin. Now, President Xi Jinping made an appeal for what he calls true multilateralism and vowed to oppose Cold War thinking and bullying. It's a vision at odds with the one championed by the United States and its Western allies, and an ill-concealed swipe at how Xi sees the way they run the world. China used the gathering to present itself as a reliable and realistic counterweight to the U.S. and to challenge Western-led alliances such as NATO and the G7. Now, leaders from 20 countries, including Russia, India, and Iran, were in attendance. Some Western observers are calling this the axis of upheaval. Together, they signed more than 20 agreements aimed at strengthening cooperation on security, trade, artificial intelligence, and energy. Now, this was a highly choreographed event, a chance for President Xi to cast himself as the leader of this new global order. It was a show designed to rattle the West, where the optics spoke for themselves. Here are some of the key moments. India's Narendra Modi was one of the leaders who joined Xi Jinping. Now, much was made of Modi's visit to China, his first in 7 years, and he came as India's ties with Washington take a nosedive over tariffs. This huddle is surely a defining image of the summit. The message: India has other important friends. But the guest of honor seemed to be Russia's Vladimir Putin. On both days of the summit, he was treated to the spot at the right of President Xi. At times, it seemed as though the other leaders were just following on behind. And when Prime Minister Modi meets a world leader, a bear hug is almost always inevitable, but he let his hands do the talking when he met Vladimir Putin. Take a look. All right. Joining me now is Tsang. He's the director of the China Institute of the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. Steve, it's good to have you back on the program. This new global order outlined by President Xi Jinping, is it a viable one?
Well, it is something Xi Jinping is very serious about. And at the moment, it is looking really not so bad, because the liberal international order is under unrelenting attack by Donald Trump, and therefore what Xi Jinping presents appeals to many countries in the global south in a way that the liberal international order being led by the West, particularly by the United States, is not looking quite so pretty.
You say the global liberal order, as we know it, led by the U.S., is under attack from Donald Trump. But can it really be challenged now by this group that we saw gathering in China? I mean, are they strong enough? Do they have the resolve to challenge the world order as we know it?
The Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting is just one of those that Xi Jinping is using to project what he calls the democratization of international relations. Xi Jinping's narrative is effectively that the existing international order is unjust, unfair, because it is an order of the West, by the West, and for the West, and the West constitute a minority in member states terms of the UN and in population terms. The global south, in contrast, constitutes the overwhelming majority, and China is its natural leader, therefore transforming the existing order to one that answers to, first and foremost, the global south as led by China will make it more democratic. So that is an argument that a lot of countries in the global south, including India, is now willing to accept.
You know, we saw those images of India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi cozying up to Xi Jinping as well as Vladimir Putin. Do you think what we saw there, was that a product of President Trump's policies?
Oh, absolutely. It really wasn't that long ago. We're talking about a matter of a few weeks ago when India was still more on the American side in terms of how they are working together, dealing with China. And India was hoping to be a China replacing country in terms of the global economic manufacturing. Now, with 50% of tariff imposed by Donald Trump, India does not have a prospect of doing so, and therefore we have seen this papering over of the strategic rivalry between India and China and the talk of them becoming development partners.
Yeah, those images with Modi and Xi and Putin, should the West really be worried? Or I'm wondering, was Modi trying to tell Donald Trump, hey, I have other friends as well?
Well, fundamentally, India and China still do not trust each other, so they are not real partners. So there is a lot of scope for the democratic West collectively to engage with India to ensure that what is being projected in Beijing does not become reality. But at the moment, we are relying on Donald Trump doing the right thing. And Donald Trump has so far in his second term been achieving triple A's in making China great again, in serving the agenda that Xi Jinping has set for China, but hasn't managed to deliver himself. Trump is delivering them.
Yeah, Xi Jinping must be a very happy leader at the moment. Steve Tsang from the China Institute of the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. Steve, as always, we appreciate your time and your insights. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'm joined now by Jabin Jacob. He's an associate professor at India's Shiv Nadar University, and he's considered a leading authority on India-China relations. Professor Jacob, it's good to have you with us. Let me ask you, is it possible to say that the SCO, the countries at the SCO summit, have they already begun to change the delicate balance of power between India and China?
I wouldn't go so far as saying that the SCO involvement or the SCO summit necessarily changes the balance between India and China. I think the current rapprochement that we see between India and China is largely tactical. It is brought about by a series of circumstances, both the international situation, the international economic situation, as well as the domestic situation in both countries.
Is it realistic for these two countries to be partners and rivals at the same time?
Well, I don't know if it's realistic, but that's the situation that we have, and that is really that is the reality. They are forced to cooperate. They have to cooperate on the economic front for good reasons of their own. But they're also strategic rivals. There are security complications in their relationship. So that's the reality we live with.
Who would you say benefits more from these closer ties between New Delhi and Beijing? Is it India or is it China?
Well, this is not a one-way street. I'd imagine that both countries benefit, which is why this engagement has taken place. If anything, I think as the economically weaker power, India has more to gain from engagement with China than the other way around.
How much of this recent engagement can be attributed to trade tensions that have been sparked by U.S. President Trump and his tariffs?
Well, the Chinese and the Indians have been working on this thaw in the relationship for over a year now. Like I said, because internal economic conditions on both sides demand it. The Chinese are facing deflation. The Indians are in need of technology and capital transfers. So there is a good reason for both countries coming together. The SCO summit, of course, was planned much in advance of the Trump administration's tariffs against India. Mm-hmm. But it certainly gives us a certain context, a certain urgency to the current engagement between India and China. But it's not the only reason for the engagement. I think the India-China relationship has its own dynamics independent of the United States or any other country.
Let me ask you, too, about what we're hearing from some Western analysts. They're calling this emerging coalition led by China an axis of upheaval, referring to the growing alignment of China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. How do you think India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, how does he feel about being associated with this group? Does he feel comfortable being a member of a group that's known as the axis of upheaval?
Look, we have to face the reality, that we have to deal with the reality that we face. We have an economic imperative, we have a security and political imperative, and not everything is aligned between India and China or some of the other nations that you just mentioned. We are a democracy. We have interests in common with the United States and Europe, but we also have economic interests in common with China and Russia. So we will work on the basis of those interests. And if we find a political difficulty in one relationship, we will obviously search for options in other relationships. Or if we find economic difficulties, then we'll search for other economic options. I think that's just the way the world works. I think the Trump tariffs the basis for the Trump tariffs saying that India supports the Russian war effort, I think that's completely unfounded and unreasonable, given that he's not imposed tariffs on the Chinese, who buy much more oil than India does from the Russians. So I think there is a degree of, international politicking, unfairness that goes on, but that's the stuff of international politics. And we simply have to deal with the reality that we are faced with.
Professor Jacob, we appreciate your time and your analysis tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.